Okay, jumping back in. It's about to start asking John. We've already talked to Patsy about her opinion, perception of the ransom note. Now he's about to talk to John about his opinion.
I showed Mrs. Ramsey yesterday in your book with respect to the ransom note. Would you read that aloud? I had Mrs. Ramsey do it too yesterday.
Number 4, the ransom note. Considered earlier and throughout the book, the note was written by the killer and remains an extremely important clue. An adequate amount of handwriting samples from the killer should conclusively tie him to the long and rambling note.
Do you still believe that statement to be true?
That is my opinion, yes.
Yes, in your opinion.
Yes.
May I ask you if any of your investigators made any attempt to examine, prepare, did any of your investigators prepare handwriting reports with respect to your handwriting and Mrs. Ramsey's handwriting?
I never saw any reports. I don't know what they've prepared.
Do you know if reports have been prepared?
I don't know that for a fact.
For the record, I do think we indicated in response to request for production that there are written reports that are in the possession of Hal Haddon under a belief on his part that they are grand jury materials that he's not allowed to release even to me, present counsel for the Ramseys. So I don't know that John knows that, but I do want to make the record clear that you know that.
Also, just to make the record clear, I don't know what effect, if any, the July 5th ruling by Judge, Denver federal judge Wiley Daniel with respect to third-party testimony and the fact that the grand jury secrecy rule with respect to that was declared unconstitutional, to the extent that that would be the statement of a party, meaning whoever the expert was, his report is in effect statements, whether or not that now would be covered under the Grand Jury Secrecy Act. So for the purposes of this record, I'll indicate that that might now be available to counsel.
I've asked Hal Haddon since that ruling to produce them for me, and he declined.
Yeah, thank you. Mr.
So basically kind of saying that, do you have access to what the grand jury said? Do either one of you have access, for the purpose of the question that I'm about to ask? Do either of you have access to what the grand jury said? And I guess Lynn is saying, well, I mean, I'm counsel. I'm a lawyer. I don't even have access to that. So I doubt John would know anything about what's going on with the grand jury.
Ramsey, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to first have the reporter mark this plaintiff's exhibit 16 for identification. If you'll do that. Mr. Wood, I'll show you this, and please show it to your client. Mr. Ramsey, I'm going to ask you to look at the document that's been marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 16 for identification, and I'm going to ask you if you recognize this document.
Yes, I believe I do.
Could you identify it, please?
Well, it appears to be a copy of the ransom note that we found in our home.
Does it look substantially like the ransom note that you saw that morning?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Now, Mr. Ramsey, I'm going to ask you to once again look at it, and I'm going to ask you if, in looking at it, whether or not you see any
It appears to be the ransom note.
similarity between your wife's handwriting and the handwriting in the ransom note, you personally.
Absolutely not.
None at all?
It's not going to work. That's not going to work, man. You can't come straight at him, man. Come on.
No,
Not even a little bit.
not even a little bit.
All right. Mr. Ramsey,
Patsy writes very neatly. She's a feminine writer.
Right.
There's misspellings in the note. She graduated at the top of her class. She doesn't misspell words like business and possession.
Huh.
Do you think the ransom note writer was trying to disguise their identity?
I've been told that that was the intent, but there are parts of it.
Let me stop you right there, sir. I think James Fitzgerald, when they went in to do their handwriting analysis, James Fitzgerald, I believe, was the handwriting analyst on the case. He was an FBI profiler. And I think he had made a statement or pointed out the two misspellings. However, that circulated and got back to them. Either that circulated through and got back to the Ramseys so that now John is quoting this in the deposition, or they already knew about those two misspelled words and they noticed it on their own, or they misspelled the words. It's one of those three.
That where that's broken down. I don't know which parts, but
Do you think that maybe some of the misspelling may have been an attempt by whoever was writing this note to disguise their identity?
I don't think so, because I think they tried to be very articulate to the best of their ability. And the misspellings were because they didn't know how to spell those words.
With respect to the sloppiness of the handwriting, do you think it's possible that the handwriting, the person who wrote this handwriting was...
So you're saying this person is dumb? You know, see, this when we talk about trying to steer a narrative. The correct response should have been, you don't know who that person is. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know who this person is. Like, they could be anyone. I don't know their education level. But the fact that you just pop out and say, you know, they just didn't know how to spell these words. How do you know that for sure, John? And Patsy, she has an education, so she wouldn't misspell these words. A lot of people with education misspell things. What are you talking about, dude? That's illogical.
trying to make their handwriting look sloppier than normal?
I don't know. It's very sloppy handwriting. I would agree with that.
Now, Mr. Ramsey, do you know were you ever told that Mrs. Ramsey could not be eliminated from any of the handwriting investigation being done by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation? Did anybody ever tell you that?
I was told that it was virtually certain that she did not write the note.
What?
But that there were some similarities which exist in all of our...
Who would have told you that? Who told you that? Dude, no one told you that. Bruh, hold on.
handwriting, because we've all been taught the same. And that's how we communicate, is with the written language in English. But that because of these few similarities, she could not be absolutely eliminated, but it was highly improbable that she wrote the note. And that in fact, there were more dissimilarities in her writing than a number of other people that have been looked at.
Right. Do you know if your handwriting was examined by the law enforcement?
As far as I know, it was.
Do you know whether or not you were eliminated as the author of the note?
I was told that on a scale of 1 to 5, Patsy was placed at a 4.5 in terms of probability. In other words, a very low probability. Mine was a 5.
But just to go back to the one point that you made, was your understanding that the reason Mrs. Ramsey could not be eliminated was because of what is, I think, called style book similarities? We all go to school, as you say. We are taught to draw to make our letters the same way. Is that the reason?
Let me object to the form of the question, only because you've used what I think is meant to be a some form of a technical term, style, look similarities.
Yes.
I don't think that was a term Mr. Ramsey used. So to the extent you misstated his testimony, I object the form. If you understand it, John, feel free to answer it.
Well, I don't know what that means. I told you what I was told, and I was told that by our attorneys. I was told that by, I've heard the police make that statement. I've heard the district attorney make that statement. But it's highly improbable that Patsy wrote this note based on their testing and our testing.
You may have heard the district attorney say that, for sure. You may have heard the district attorney say that. I think I heard somewhere like the DA and the cop and like the police department were like fighting because the DA was trying to clear the Ramseys. But like the cops were like, no, we're still holding on to them as suspects, allegedly.
Do you know if she was the only one that law enforcement could not completely eliminate?
Which is why the cops apparently now, I believe, which is why the cops don't tell John anything. That would be why they don't tell the Ramsey family anything, or they don't allow the Ramsey family in the investigation. I mean, number one. Number two, we have to take responsibility for what you have done in the investigation. Please take responsibility for what you have done. Stop blaming it on the cops. Oh, the cops did this. The cops did. Stop blaming it on the cops. You called. First of all, you picked up a body and moved it upstairs under your own admission. You did that. I don't care what you felt. You did that. You moved a body. I don't know anybody else who has done that. I don't know them. I'm pretty sure you could find something, but I don't know of any examples off the top of my head where somebody moved the body and was innocent and did it for the right reasons. Number two, I don't know of anybody. I understand people call friends, but I don't know of anybody who called friends to trample throughout the crime scene and move stuff around in the cop's face. Do you know what kind of bullying you have to be doing to a cop to do something like that? Do you know what kind of slick stuff you got to be doing to say, hey, let me do what I need to do to, why don't you just sit down? Why are you displaying nervous energy toward me? Just sit down.
No, in fact, I was told that your client had fewer dissimilarities than Patsy had with the note.
Without revealing an attorney-client privilege, do you know who told you that? Was it a law enforcement source or was it your private investigators?
I don't recall.
Of course you don't.
I don't recall.
I do.
Let's see, I got to stop you right there. Because you're making a claim that you can't tie to nothing. Can't have you make claims. This is why we're here right now. That's why we're here now. Because my client is saying, yo, you're making a claim against me that I was involved in something that I wasn't. And you just spout off at the mouth and you say, oh, matter of fact, someone told me that your handwriting looked a little bit more like the letter than my wife's. Who told you that? Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. Y'all, Linda Hoffman Pugh sued for libel. She didn't win because they didn't mention her name. But she felt like they alluded to her in their book because of this stuff. And everybody else was thrown under the bus because of this stuff.
I was told that there were other people that were tested that were much more interesting than Patsy in terms of a comparison.
Like who?
Now, how do you know that?
I was told that. I don't recall by whom. It's general knowledge that I have in my head.
Plus, I wanted to point out I have not shared with Mr. Ramsey Alex Hunter's testimony on that very point, which I think you were aware of when he stated there were a number of people that had not been eliminated that were under suspicion.
I just want to know how Mr. Ramsey, if he remembers how he knows that, or whatever, with
Please.
respect to it. Now, Mr. Ramsey, I'm going to ask you to do something that I did yesterday, at least in a few pages here, and that is I'm going to ask you to look at Plaintiff's Exhibit number 1 that was marked for identification yesterday, and I'd like you to look at that document.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you if you recognize, without naming anybody, any of the figures in that particular document.
I think I recognize 2.
Now, I'm going to ask you to look at the handwriting beneath the document, and I'm going to ask you if you recognize that handwriting.
I do not.
Could it be your wife's handwriting?
I don't recognize it. It doesn't look like Patsy's writing. It's sloppy. It's irregular. I would not look at that and say that's Patsy's handwriting.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to hand you Plaintiff's Exhibit number 2 that was marked for identification yesterday, and I'm going to ask you to please look at that.
He might be
Now, I'm
sitting
going to
there.
ask you if you can identify, without naming the individuals in those photographs, any of them.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to ask you to look at the handwriting and tell me if you can recognize the handwriting.
I do not.
Could that be your wife's handwriting?
I doubt it very seriously.
Can you tell me why you don't think it's your wife's handwriting?
It doesn't look like her handwriting. It's sloppy. It's just doesn't look like her handwriting.
I don't think I need to look at any of the other. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you to look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 11, marked for identification, and all I'm going to ask you to do is look at this document and tell me if you've ever seen it before.
Not that I recall.
So, would it be fair to say that today is the first time you've ever seen that document?
I think so. I don't remember seeing it. I don't remember seeing it. Let me put it that way.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Ramsey,
We can see very clear behavioral patterns between John and Patsy here. Their head shaking and the movements and the phrases are starting to blend. Patsy, that's all Patsy. I don't remember it. I don't think so. And John just did the same thing that Patsy would do. I don't know. I don't think so. That is like so similar to Patsy. It's crazy.
do you know, have you ever heard the name Sina Wong?
I have heard that name in association with you. Yes.
Do you know who Sina Wong is?
I have no idea.
Have you heard the name David Liebman?
It was on that form right there.
Had you ever heard the name or seen the name before this?
Not that I recall.
Are you aware that those names appear in your book?
Very possible.
So you weren't the person that provided the names in the book, in the manuscript, is that correct?
I don't remember. It's possible.
No?
I found that my brain cells have depleted a lot during the last 5 years.
I'll bet they have, John. No?
Have you ever heard the name Howard Ryle?
Yes.
Can you tell me who Howard Ryle is?
Sina Wong is the handwriting expert who analyzed the note, the ransom note, and she found, as she said, I think like 200 something odd similarities. She would be the one between Patsy's handwriting and the ransom note. She would be one of the biggest proponents against Patsy being innocent in this case in terms of writing the ransom note. She was one of the biggest proponents for saying Patsy was the author of the ransom note. And it's interesting to note then that this far back to where you've written a book and you've put her in it, you know her work. And see, this is what I'm saying. The Ramseys play games, but y'all know who the players are. Y'all know who people are. But you sit here and you play games and act like you don't know who people are. It's in your book, John. You guys, and that's what Mr. Hoffman was asking earlier when he was talking to Patsy. He was asking specifically who wrote this book. Like, did y'all have an editor write this book? Did you write? Did y'all do audio books, or did y'all do dictation, or did y'all sit down and type? What did y'all do? I want to know what y'all did, because I want to know who had responsibility for certain parts of the authorship in this book. And they were like, oh, I wrote some, John wrote some, our pastor wrote some in editorial, and that's how it went. But basically, one of you guys put Sina Wong, the handwriting expert that was working against Patsy, in the book, and you probably said something like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. I don't know what this expert is talking about. Can't be Patsy. You're lying.
He is either a handwriting expert or a expert linguistic examiner. I don't remember which.
Do you know the context in which you heard his name?
I think he was someone that our attorneys consulted to examine a number of documents that we'd received.
Do you know if he examined Mrs. Ramsey's handwriting?
I believe that he did, yes.
Do you know if he prepared a written report?
I don't know.
Again, you
Isn't he the one that's writing a book?
No, that's someone
Cunningham?
else.
Okay.
Again, we go back and we have provided you, as his counsel, information that Mr. Ryle and Mr. Cunningham, we are told, did prepare written reports, but they were submitted to the grand jury, and they are again in the possession of Al Haddon. And the question of releasing them from Mr. Haddon, at least, is something that he has not done voluntarily yet. Whether he would do that in response to a request from you, I don't know.
Okay.
But there are written reports from Mr. Ryle and Mr. Cunningham about Mrs. Ramsey.
Have you ever heard the name Floyd Cunningham, Mr. Ramsey?
Yes.
Lloyd.
I'm sorry, is it Floyd?
Lloyd.
Oh, Lloyd.
No,
Lloyd. I'm sorry. Oh, no, I thought Floyd. Lloyd Cunningham. Have you ever heard
Yes.
that name? Can you tell me in what context you heard that name?
I think he was someone that was used by our attorneys and investigators to look at handwriting exemplars.
Do you know anything else?
That he's at the top of his field. That's what I remember.
Do you know if Mr. Cunningham prepared a written handwriting report?
I don't know that for a fact.
Again, same
Yes,
observation for
absolutely.
your benefit and benefit of the record.
Yes. I want to make sure that what I'm about to say is accurate. So I have to do just a summation. Mr. Wood will absolutely correct me if I'm wrong in characterizing anything you've said.
Sounds like an invitation.
It is, Mr. Wood, in this particular instance. I want to make sure I'm correct. You have not personally seen the handwriting report, if there was one, by Mr. Ryle. Is that correct?
Hang on a second. Let me just confirm.
Sure,
because
sure,
I want to make sure we're not touching into an area that might go to attorney-client privilege.
Okay.
Because that report was prepared by former counsel for Mr. Ramsey, or at their request. For
Well, I can
purposes.
remove the offending language as to who prepared it. Prepared for him, I don't know who prepared it for him. I'm not asking that.
No.
This handwriting report by Mr. Ra was prepared for the Ramseys, irrespective of who prepared it. I'm not trying to identify who prepared it, but that it was prepared by some person for you.
Why don't you
I
read
know
it?
of no report that was prepared for us that I saw.
And when you say report, I'm more interested in if you had an opportunity to see any report involving handwriting of either Mrs. Ramsey or yourself by any expert that you or your agents and people that worked for you hired. Did you have an opportunity to see any report?
I don't recall seeing any report.
Do you remember whether or not you had an opportunity to see any other handwriting reports by, say, law enforcement?
I don't recall seeing any reports from law enforcement, no.
Then are you saying that you're relying on the opinion or statements of people that have seen those reports as the basis for your belief that Mrs. Ramsey is?
You see, Lynn Wood's elbow came back. Now you're listening to me. Because you're saying that you haven't seen any reports of anything yet about any handwriting expert analysis, right? That's what you're telling me. You're telling me that you haven't seen any reports of what the people, you know you've done handwriting samples, but you don't know what they said about you. You don't know what they wrote. For all you know, they just put, guy has a big head and little feet. That's all you know. For all you know, they wrote. For all you know, they could have been doodling on their notepad. But yet you sit here today and you talk to us about specifics of handwriting professionals and what they have said about your handwriting and how they have accused you or not accused you, how they have actually pointed to other people who may be more aligned with the handwriting of the ransom note. So I got to ask you, if you haven't seen any of the reports that gave an analysis or response on your handwriting, how do you know what people said about your handwriting if you haven't seen any reports? You just got caught in a lie.
It's not the ransom note, right?
Hold on a second.
Mm-hmm. Now we got to hold on a second, because you just got caught trying to be sneaky, trying to, I don't know, saying a bunch of I don't knows. You done got caught in a lie. And now we got to stop. Hold on a second. And do what, Lynn? And do what?
I don't know how he's going to differentiate counsel's discussions.
Well,
You want to omit counsel?
You mean our discussions?
Well, you say that you're relying, then are you saying that you're relying upon the opinion or statements of people that have seen those reports as the basis for your belief that Mrs. Ramsey is not the ransom note writer?
Well, if
Do you understand what he's asking you?
to put it more
I'm going to let him answer.
Oh, okay,
Let's go ahead and just let him answer.
no, I do not base my opinion on the reports that I've heard from others. I base my opinion on that I know my wife. I would
No, sir. No, sir. You put one of the top experts who came out against your wife in your book. Somehow, some way, you know about the reports. I don't know if your attorney told you. I don't know if you found out through the grapevine. You know what those reports say. It ain't about you believing that your wife is innocent because you are mentioning specific people whose reports you disagree with. That's the problem here.
Take my life on the fact that she did not murder her child. She did not fake all of this nonsense, and she did not write this bizarre note. That's what I stake my belief on, Mr.
So
Hoffman.
it's not based on.
Now he's mad. Now he got a problem. But the way that he fumbled to come up with an answer, he might be lying.
Anything empirical, such as
The
reports.
empirical information supports that belief totally.
I'm just wanting to determine whether you're familiar with the empirical information that supports it.
Yes.
I'm trying to distinguish between your belief in your wife, which is understandable, and a belief that comes from actually having looked at forensic evidence that you personally have had an opportunity to view.
But let me just, again, I'm going to object to the form of that question because at one point you're talking about determine whether he's familiar with the information.
I'm going to stop it right there. You about to see, Lynn knows he's in trouble. Lynn knows that there is a problem. You done caught me in a lie. Now Lynn wants to talk and say, because what happened was, and the reason Lynn wasn't objecting, this is why he wasn't objecting. He wasn't objecting because he trusts John to do what John is going to do. John seemed like he had it under control. Number two, he seemed like he had it under control. Number three, Lynn himself didn't know where Mr. Hoffman was going with the question. That was a great sequence because Lynn didn't even know where Mr. Hoffman was going with that question. And Mr. Hoffman doubled back and went boom. So you telling me you didn't see any reports? And what he means when he says empirical, he's saying there's scientific evidence that we've done and by scientific, he's talking about the handwriting analysis that we've done. We've done handwriting analysis, and I'll stop it here. We've done the handwriting analysis, and we've written reports on what we think or who we think the author is. You're telling me that you have not seen that empirical analysis. And you are saying that you told me that you said you haven't seen any reports, and you're saying that the only thing that you're staking your claim that you know for a fact that your wife didn't do it based on your wife and your wife is not involved in this. First of all, two things. I didn't ask you whether or not your wife was involved in the murder. Just because your wife writes the note doesn't mean that she's involved in the murder. Now I understand it's a slippery slope. So I gotta, if I want to make sure I protect my wife, I might have to lie and to keep her out of just even going down that slippery slope, because nobody's going to believe, well, if you cover this up, what else did you cover up? So I gotta keep away from that slippery slope. However, John is very aware now that he's been caught in a lie and he can't get out of it. That's the problem. And now Lynn, who didn't know where Mr. Hoffman was going, has also been caught. I was going to say with his pants down, but he's been caught not protecting his client. And so now he's trying to strike, go back, push back. Nonsense. We got you. I'm going to stop it right there. We're going to continue the analysis here in a little bit. But until next time, let me know what you think. Take it easy.